Oh, Hare Krishna, everyone. Um, by the grace of our teachers and our sweet Lord, we have come together today to explore our potential possibilities, this ever-evolving journey of love. It's not by chance that we're here today. Krishna has a plan for all of us, and if we can only put our hand out to grasp his hand, all will be revealed. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. So, our satsang has been officially inaugurated. So welcome you all. Very happy to be here today again from Ananda Ashram, North Carolina. So, yeah, gathering as usual every Saturday, trying to justify our existence in satsanga, so to say, trying to honor the fact that we are here and trying to do something with this beautiful gift of reality and existence in the context of bhakti. So trying to somehow or other not measure, but become more and more aware of the extent of our good fortune by sharing with one another. It's always a very sacred discipline, exercise, right? Trying to expand our awareness of the nature of the gift. That's another way of defining Krishna consciousness, to be conscious of Krishna, but not just of a guy named Krishna that exists somewhere, but of all that it means for Krishna to exist and for us to exist in relationship to Krishna. So Krishna consciousness means basically that, not only to be aware of Krishna, not only to be aware of what does it mean that Krishna exists and we exist in connection to him, but to constantly increase our awareness and presence to that fact, right? Because it's a never-ending awareness. It's a never-ending reality we are trying to be aware of. So our capacity to be conscious of Krishna is similarly never-ending, ever unfolding. So we always have a good reason to meet again next week and next week for eternity, since the object of our affection is ever evolving, ever unfolding. So we can always become more Krishna conscious, right? There's no ending point to Krishna consciousness. That's our hope. That's the nature of the gift. It's a gift that you never, you never end up opening. No? You receive a gift and you have the box with the gift. Okay, I open the box. Here's the gift. Okay. But in this case, it's like you can always continue to open, like this matrushka dolls that you open, and there's another one inside, another one inside. But in this case, there's no final one. Okay, that's the final one. There's nothing else inside. Finally, we reach the end point, irreducible reality. No, in this case, it's ever expanding. So yeah, we keep opening the box. We keep opening the gift and marveling at the miracle of what has touched us. So thank you so much for being part of that. Yeah. Okay. There are a few hands raised. So as you may know, you're invited to share any thoughts, questions, explorations, quests you may be journeying on, and somehow or other we'll try to honor that, offer some feedback, and share it all together. So let's begin with Manjwali. Let's travel together to Glastonbury for a few moments.
Hare Krishna Pranam Maharaj. I think Rishangi was actually before me, but I happen to be in the queue. Okay, so thank you. My question, which I've been sitting with for a long time, is about in the path of Bhakti Yoga in the Gaudiya school. The concentration is mostly on japa, kirtan, and study. And there is dhyana, or silent meditation, is not one of the taught practices. And so I was just, and the silent meditation is not that it's silent, but that it's an opportunity to sit quietly and turn the name in silence without loud. And I just wanted to, I know you speak about in radical personalism, contemplative prayer, and taking the prayer deep inside and sitting with the prayer as an act of service and an act of discovery and an act of entering into a relationship with the mystery. So so my question really is, the whole chapter, the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is all about meditation. And especially that 634 that says the mind is restless and turbulent and strong and obstinate and is like the wind. And we're taught by Mahaprabhu that in the age of Kali, Harinam, japa, and Sankirtan is the easier gateway to God realization. And that meditation was something in the Dwapara Yuga, and that it's explained that it's a harder practice. Now, I just wanted to explore with you exactly how it fits, because in my own spiritual practice for many, many years, it's a place, meditation has been one of the pillars that has helped me to calm the mind, to focus, to heal, to be present to the name, and to surrender and the mind and tether the mind in by working with the breath. So I just wanted to know your inspirations on this and any exploration you can share to not just validate the practice, but whatever faith tradition we're in, all faith traditions have a place for silence, a place for the contemplative inner sitting, waiting, listening. And Mona, silence, plays in all mystic traditions an important part in helping the soul to be present to the mystery. So do you have any thoughts on this? And yeah, I just wanted to see what your thoughts are, because in our training in Gaudiya Vaishnavas, it's not one of the highlighted, in my understanding, and I probably might be off, it's just not highlighted as not that it's not a viable gateway, but it's dismissed as too hard. And it can be so helpful. Okay, thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. You've sent us on a quest now, Manjuli. That's a trip. We are all tripping now on your presentation. So it's a beautiful point. Yeah. So where to begin? Yeah, I will begin by saying that, of course, meditation is part of our tradition, is part of, you say, of any tradition, of every major tradition. Also, we are using words here, meditation. What's the meaning of that may differ in different schools or persons, but ultimately it all converges into a form of meditation, of course, into a form of natural absorption, like the final or highest instruction of the Gita that Krishna presents is man-mana, right? Like, give your mind to me, absorb yourself in me. The very 6th chapter of the Gita that you refers, that speaks about dhyana yoga, the yoga of meditation, concludes praising Bhakti, right? Yogi nama pisharvisam, and so on. Krishna is saying, He's talking about different types of yogis. And he concludes saying that the bhakta, those who worship him with deep faith, are the highest yogis or meditators, right? So then there comes the connectedness between bhakti and dhyana, or meditation and devotion, because sometimes we may draw some very intense, thick lines between practices. No, this is meditation, this devotion. We are devotees. We have nothing to do with meditation. Meditation is for whomever, those kids on the other side of the river. but no. Mm-hmm. Meditation is both it's both the final, in one sense, fruit of our practice in the form of mental absorption, full presence to develop, if you will, but also meditation is an anga of sadhana bhakti, an aspect of the practice of devotion. For example, Prahlad Maharaj will say Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. No, Smaranam means to remember, but also can be connected to the idea of meditation. We have this famous verse, Smartavya Satatam Vishnu, always remember Krishna, never forget him. All rules and regulations from scripture are subservience of these two principles. So it all converges in a type of meditation. So in one sense, we could say chanting of the name of Krishna also can be seen as meditation. It's a meditation on the sound, japa in particular, but kirtan as well. So we could say there are different types of meditation. Maybe for some, this may sound too loose, but ideally, whatever a devotee does on a daily basis, everything should be meditation, right? Everything can carry that spirit, no? Meditation. And by meditation, again, I'm not referring only to, okay, I see it, I close my eyes and I try to focus on something by personal effort, but also I basically try to be present, try to be aware, as we were talking before, of what's taking place in this precise moment, and become absorbed in that. And I can be cooking, and I can be cleaning, and I can be chanting, and I can be reading, and I can be doing anything, and it can become a form of meditation. So I think it's important also to expand the possibilities of what meditation entails. That on one side, and of course, there's also a place for just sitting, just stopping doing everything we are doing, and as you mentioned, Manjali, being in silence and trying to be present, trying to listen deeply, which is mentioned in our tradition. As you mentioned, it may not be, it may not be the most prioritized form of sadhana as presented in most of the Gaudiya training, if you want to put it that way, that most of us have had. But it doesn't mean that it's absolutely absent, much less forbidden, bad, or whomever, right? So it's there in scripture, as I try to refer to in Radical Personalism, quoting both the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam, and purports by Prabhupada, where he will say things like, I don't recall the exact wording, but he will say something like, silence is the highest worship, or things like that, right? Krishna in the Gita will say, from all secrets, I'm silence. So silence, again, if we go to silence, all this for me is a redefining of terms, because again, regarding meditation, we may have a certain idea what's meditation. Okay, now we're talking about silence. We may have certain idea of what is silence, but many times the problem are our ideas about things. And how our ideas get in the way of the experience, right? And unfortunately, many times religious circles have done that, have institutionalized certain ideas or concepts in such a way that they get in the way of us having a real experience of the divine. That's one of the famous quotes by Carl Jung. I don't recall it again exactly, Seems today my memory is failing a little bit, but he will say something like, yeah, one of the main things that religion has done is to prevent people from a genuine spiritual experience.
Hmm.
Like implying they were supposed to facilitate that, right? So sometimes, again, silence is there, but the point is we end up stigmatizing silence by misunderstanding what the very concept means. I've heard sometimes in our tradition, Gaudiya Vaishnava saying, "Oh, silence has nothing to do with us. It's impersonal. We have the holy name. There's no need to shut up. You can always pronounce the name," and so on. And of course, there's a place for that. If you have that capacity and be all day long invoking the sacred name, that's beautiful. But also there is place for embracing silence, which, again, properly understood, silence has nothing to do with silence.
Yeah.
Silence is not about silence. Right? Silence is about listening. Listening those things that we cannot listen otherwise unless we enter silence.
Yes.
And let's be honest, most of us in our contemporary modern society, we live surrounded by considerable noise. On a societal level, media level, mental level, inside, outside. So silence becomes probably more than ever a deep necessity. Silence, again, is not about not speaking, it's about start listening. Stop the noise, start the actual listening, gain presence, pay attention to what's worthy of paying attention. So all that falls into different categories of bhakti. This is not like some foreign introduction, like exporting into bhakti something that does not belong. Because if we are entering into silence for an encounter with God, with reality as it is, as naked as it is, so to say, silence is a very important tool. And that's why you read, if we pay attention to the scriptures, there are many sections where great sages enter into silence, retire into silence, take a vow of silence for a certain period of time, for the rest of their lifetime. Pray silence. Again, in many parts of the scripture, the devotees describe as a moni. Moni means silent, which doesn't necessarily mean that he or she doesn't speak at all, but we should know when to stop speaking and when to enter silence, to speak from what comes out of that silence. So all our speech should be informed by silence. Let's put it that way. Many times our speech is informed by noise, by public opinion, by intimidation, by whatever. So many long list. But our deepest words should be informed by silence. But what's being spoken in silence. So again, many times in order for us to access that realm, we need to make some considerable effort of stopping doing all that we are doing and just trying to do that. And of course, that will be confronting, because in the beginning, probably what we will hear is not the voice of the divine. We will hear all other kinds of voices in silence. Like as I like to say, like some type of what's this word? It's not coming now. Anyhow, but something is very repetitive, right? Like repetitive voices, catatonic repetition, useless ideas that come over and over again, very mechanically from the mind, from so many
rumination.
Yeah, from so many unresolved places, and we need to become aware of that, and gradually let that go and return to our place of presence. So, and I would say also, in part, as you mentioned also, Manjali, the chanting of the name of Krishna, though, is of course highlighted as main practice in our tradition. There are different ways to understand this. Bhakti Thakur will say that in the beginning, for some people, japa is difficult to just sit and concentrate on the name. So he recommends Sankirtan. Loud chanting with musical instruments is more engaging. So my point with this is different people are in different, not only different stages, but they have different dispositions. So for some of them, Sankirtan becomes the main anga, the main aspect of practice. And this, of course, is a long conversation. We already have 108 times. In terms that in some Gaudiya institutions, japa has kind of become, not only japa, but a certain number of chanting japa is kind of like the whole success in your practice is limited to whether you reach that number per day or not. So this is a very, in my opinion, very reductionistic way of conceiving bhakti. Even if you're chanting on a certain number that you have committed to, I'm not against that. I'm just complaining, so to say, about perceiving and conceiving the whole devotional experience. All that boiled down and reduced to that particular thing. Get your daily number. If you get your daily quota, you're in. If not, you're out. And for me, that's like not true. That doesn't work. And it becomes a problem in both cases. If you don't attain the number, of course, it becomes a problem and you self-torture. But if you attain the number, probably that's a bigger problem, because now you're absolutely confident that you are in just by reaching a number and you don't need to do anything else. So that's probably more complicated. So the whole devotional experience to live a life of divine love is way more nuanced than a daily number. Please don't be so cruel with yourself. And I'm making, by saying this, I'm making it more difficult, not more easy for you, right? Because to make it more easy, it's just, you just reach your daily number and you're in. And I'm telling you, no, that doesn't work like that. And it's not me the one telling you that. That's what Krishna says in the Gita over and over again. It's all about your state of consciousness. Jam jambapi shmaram bhavam tyayantyanti kalevaram. Etc. How you, the state of consciousness you have in this life, that's how you will live this body. In other words, you attain a corresponding realm according to the realm you are in now, basically, the state of existence, your bhava, your mood, your meditation, if we want to use that word. So in one sense, it's all about meditation. It's all about meditation. Our japa should be meditation, as we were saying. Our cooking should be meditation. We should be able to, and I'm not saying this easy again, but at least in principle, we should be able to craft each act we are performing and make it a meditation. In potential, everything has that potential. Everything has that potential. Every single act. How going to the bathroom can be a meditation again. How peeling a potato can be a meditation. How sweeping the living room can be a meditation. Yeah, that's it. That's a wonderful question that we should ask a few times per day and invest ourselves in that moment. Again, now I'm reading a few books. One of them is The Way of the Pilgrim. Maybe you heard about this. It's a beautiful book, very well-known one, but I never read it before for whatever reason. And it kept coming to me and I kept not avoiding it, but somehow I never read it. So I'm reading it now. And as you know, this is the famous story of a Russian person who is reciting the Jesus prayer, and and that becomes part of his every breath, every moment. So that's a very simple way of speaking about this. How can you invoke meditation, prayer, focus, presence, whatever you are doing? And at one point he will say, he repeated that so many times that it became second nature, and he will be internally vibrating in that prayer while externally doing something else. Of course, that's speaking about advanced stages of practice. In the beginning, he will say he had difficulties for that. So again, we have to be crafty in bhakti, and we have to be very, very much in touch with who we are and where we are in order for our practices to work for us. because it's not just about, again, importing some particular form of sadhana and pressing it by force, and that's it. At some point, it has to work, and I'm not thinking much about it. No, we have to reflect and to share with our mentors where we are, how we are, acknowledge our adhikar, our present capacities, incapacities, and to see what's the most fruitful way to approach our relationship with Krishna in this chapter. Again, it's all, again, Bhakti is our relationship with God. No? It's not a religion in an institutional sense. It's not a belonging system in a fitting way. It's my relationship with the sweet absolute. And every relationship is unique, and every relationship has its own, different landscapes in the journey. I think you have, think about any of your relationships, your significant relationships on earth with different people. I don't think you can say that all of them were always in the same chapter, always the landscape was the same, we were always the same. No. It's a constant movement, it's a constant journey, both traveling together in the journey. So why to make, of course, Krishna is categorically a different person than everyone else in one sense, but in another sense he's similar enough for us to conceive our relationship with God in likewise terms, on some level at least. So our spiritual practice is nothing but, the development of our relationship with the divine and everything else by extension. So it will look different at different times. So at sometimes silence will appear in a certain way. At some other times, silence will mean something else, will take certain shape. But I personally wouldn't exclude the notion of silence, the practice of silence, the practice of meditation as something inferior, foreign, secondary to our tradition, but actually, again, properly understood, properly explained, properly conceived, it's the essence of that. The essence of our practice and life is love, divine love, and that's in itself a form of meditation, right? And that brings a form of absorption, a form of presence, a form of focus. So we have to practice in a way that the goal is, we practice in a way that we are already attaining the goal in the day-to-day, because Bhakti is the goal, Bhakti is the practice. So the goal is to be absorbed in the divine. Well, how can I do it here now? In some way or another. So I don't know, those are the thoughts that came today.
Thank you, Maharaj. And I was just remembering Srila Sridhar Maharaj, between every piece of information and every sentence he would deliver, he would always end it with Gaur Hari Bol, Gaur Hari Bol. So it was like everything was wrapped in the holy name. And that wrapping was the presence of divinity, which he taught us by just, sharing Harikatha, but always anchoring it in the holy name. And Srila Prabhupada told me once, always remember Krishna and never forget him. So basically, whatever situation and whichever, we're all different, and whatever we're called, our propensities are all different. But as long as I really liked what you said, that actually it's just all about presence, and it's about the relationship of entering into that present, and everything we do should be an act of loving devotion. So thank you for that. That was very lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Gaur Hari Bol. Gaur Hari Bol. Rasangi, there you are.
I am. Well, I have two questions, but one of them is bothering me more, and we have a line. So I'll take this one first.
Yeah, let's go to the more disturbing one.
Yeah. I guess. So Maharaj, in Srila Sridhar Maharaj's book, Sri Guru and His Grace, this is a parampara kind of question, but it's more than that. It's about maintaining a rigid adherence to what I consider to be the instructions that have come to me, and the difficulty kind of loosening that grip. So he talks about Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, and Einstein. He compares the parampara to that. And when I looked up what each of them contributed, well, Copernicus thought the sun revolved around the earth. And then Galileo believed the earth revolved around the sun. They're totally different. They're freaking totally different. They're not even, you know what I mean? And then there comes Newton and then Einstein, and gradually things are changed. And so, when I compare aparampara to that, and I loosen my grip on the rigidity of what I think it is or what I'm told, it is like Manjwali was referring to, loosening that. I find myself kind of floating, like maybe unsure, but I want to let go of the rigidity that I allowed to control me for 50 years, because I'm following this current, this live current. And so I thought maybe you could talk about that a little bit, about what it's like to let go of the rigidity of thinking that we get comfortable in, but that doesn't really lead us where we want to go. And then surrendering to the current where we have to what? We have to feel it. We have to, how do we know? I mean, I think I know that current because I feel happy. I feel connected with divinity when I follow that current, but still there's resistance in me. I'm supposed to follow the formula. I'm supposed to follow the formula, and I'm not doing that anymore. And it's like it's unearthing, but it's totally satisfying. I'm listening to Richard Rohr a lot and also getting really inspired and fortified, by his words and concepts. Do you know what I mean? Is that a decent question? How to let go of the rigidity of something that we thought was so, take it to the bank. Take it to the bank. We could take it to the bank. And and now we're letting go of it, and it's a little, my palms are sweaty. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There are a few things there, Rasangi. First, you are quoting Srila Sridhar Maharaj, where he's given this example of Galileo and Copernicus, Newton, Einstein. Of course, just to understand the context of in which he's given this example, he's mentioning that while describing the concept of Siksha Guru Parampara, right? Bhagavat Parampara. Because you mentioned this idea, okay, between Copernicus and Galileo, they have the exact opposite idea. So that does it mean that in Parampara that needs to happen, or that he pointing to that? No, he's just mentioning people who at their particular time came with a very remarkable idea, and they will be the ones highlighted. Though they may differ one from each other, but they contributed their own important notions at that time. Though even after some time they were debunked. So the context in which he's saying that is Bhagavad Parampara acknowledges those special personalities in the Parampara, and does not necessarily include every single person that was in the lineage. He will make a difference between a succession of bodies and a succession of thoughts or insight represented by certain particular individuals, even if they are not necessarily bodily connected, which doesn't mean that they don't have guru. It's just that the emphasis is placed on certain special contributions made throughout the lineage. That's on one side, just a clarification, technical clarification. But your main question, at least I heard many times the word rigidity, so it seems that your main question revolves around that. And what to do with rigidity in the context of parampara. And of course, we are all rigid on some level, right? Even if we don't want to be rigid, I mean, it's part of the journey. I personally, how to say, I don't like to identify myself as a rigid person. I wouldn't like to think of me as such, but that doesn't mean that I'm not rigid in any way, right? in way, and I'm not saying that to justify my rigidity. I'm just saying that probably I need to still work on that, but there are so many degrees of that, no? So let's not, again, think in black and white about rigidity, because that in itself is rigidity. To conceive rigidity in a very rigid way, in a very unnuanced way. So yeah, there is rigidity in different degrees in almost every single entity. Depending, again, the stage of our journey, we may need to be rigid. As we say, in the beginning of the journey, we may need to be fanatical. We may need to be self-centered even. Not like a baby. A baby is self-centered. A baby cannot think about other beings. It's too much for them to think about. They don't have yet the capacity to conceive the existence of other human beings apart from themselves. Which, speaking as adults, may sound like okay, this guy is hyper narcissist. No, this is a real dysfunction. No, you are the center of the universe. But for a baby, that's how it feels. They feel and relate and perceive everything in connection to themselves as a reference point. Not with bad intention, just that's the stage of unfolding of consciousness in that particular chapter of their journey. So there's some rigidity, if you want to use that term, in that connection, right? They are not flexible enough to accommodate other people, not because they don't want, just they can't yet. They haven't had, it will be too overwhelming for a baby to think about other people. It will be too overwhelming for a baby to think that eventually other people's parents are as good as their parents, as we always say. For a baby, my parent is the best parent of the world. No question about it. But eventually you grow to the realization that may not be the case, which doesn't mean I stop loving my parents. It's just I stop idolizing them. I realized, that's no longer necessary. So I'm saying all this to mean we are moving through chapters in the journey, and we are letting go certain degree of rigidity, certain degree of fanaticism, certain degree of over-idealizing stuff. I'm moving into a more nuanced conception of things. And then after some time, that nuanced, dynamic way becomes statu quo. Right? And we need to deconstruct again. No, as you quoted Richard Rohr, he will use this wisdom pattern he calls of order, disorder, reorder, right? So we need order. If we want to talk, even relate order with rigidity, we need some order, things to be in a certain way. We need some stability, some certainty. We are not fully against that. But at some point, that order becomes stifling, you say in English? Like suffocating and stagnant.
Stifling.
I think it's stifling. Yeah.
Okay, stifling. Thank you. So at some point, that order needs to be disrupted. And if you don't do so, no problem. Life will do it for yourself. So there will come some sacred disruptions. And you have to accept that. And after that, he calls it disorder, comes a reorder, a new order of things. Still, it's a form of order, but it's a new one. So if you are too attached to the previous order, the new order looks like chaos or disorder, but actually it's a new order. in order to accommodate reality in a bigger, deeper way. So rigidity has to do with the unwillingness to let that happen. Let's put it that way. Toxic rigidity. No, like I'm addicted to things being in a certain way. Things, even idea, thoughts, being in a certain way. Krishna is this. Bhakti is this. I am this. This is this. That is like that. And everything has to conform to certain boxes. But again, behind that unwillingness to allow disorder, yeah, there is fear probably. And I'm saying all that so we can address all this with compassion, right? We are not here condemning, criticizing anyone, just to humanly understand our unwillingness to confront the unknown, the unwillingness to confront chaos, the unwillingness to confront mystery, disorder, or what we perceive as disorder, what lies beyond our comfort zone. But we need to do that in order to grow. Because, as I say, even if you want to rigidly stick to certain ways of things being, life itself will disrupt all that. And sometimes we are very expert and not at resisting the disrupting. And things start to crumble, and things start to collapse, and things start to break because they need to, in order to allow a new order. The whole building sometimes needs to collapse, reduce to ashes. It's necessary. Those are the movements of nature. If we pay attention to the cycles of existence, creation, maintenance, dissolution, creation, maintenance, dissolution. So at some dissolution has a role also. It's not bad. No, it's not like, oh, why Shiva is doing that? No, he's a bad guy. There comes the destroyer. Hallelujah. No, that's required to bring a new order in place. No? So we are Vaishnavas, and sometimes I make this connection. Vaishnavas are connected to Vishnu. Vishnu is connected to maintenance. So we are supposed to maintain, but we have to understand this not in a non-toxic way. It's not maintain, it's keeping everything in the same way forever with toxic rigidity. I'm a Vaishnava. I'm performing my dharma. I fulfill my duty as a Vaishnava. I'm following Vishnu. I'm maintaining. No, maintaining means understanding that part of maintenance requires dissolution. Part of order requires disorder and reorder. That's maintenance. Again, how can you maintain a relationship if it doesn't move, if it doesn't change, if it doesn't imbibe from transformation, if it doesn't embrace crisis and acknowledges all the ups and downs of any relationship? All that needs to be brought into the picture for actual maintenance to take place. Maintenance is not just a obsessive, desperate effort to keep things in a certain way forever. And when the building is crumbling, you bring some Scotch tape, this thing, and you try to fix everything so it looks still is there, still the whole thing is collapsing. But you're desperately putting all this tape around, trying to somehow look it nice and not have to face the reality that needs to die. And it's already in the process of doing so. So we have to let go. And that's a micro and macro template, right? That's happening with our own bodies. I mean, the system is collapsing in many ways. Eventually, we have to leave this vessel. There is sickness. There's all this type of... It's all a big lesson for us to learn around us. Again, the famous main lesson that Yudhishthira Maharaj mentioned when he was asking this lake of death, what's the most astonishing thing you find in this world? And he said that everything is basically collapsing and nobody wants to accept that. He will say everyone is dying and everyone lives as if they will never die. But you extend that to this natural cycle, creation, maintenance, dissolution. So everything is being dissolved. Everything is entering that cycle, but we don't want to we are rigid. Again, rigidity is a form of denial, basically. A form of denial of reality. Again, when we are in kindergarten level, rigidity has its place and helps us. And in other stages, I'm not denying it has some place, but I'm talking about those types of rigidities we need to let go to move forward. That will be a symptom of unwillingness to accept reality, denial, resistance. So the real question is not so much what to do with rigidity, but why I'm resisting. No, what's the reason behind my denial? What I'm afraid of. The question inside the question.
Maharaj, I think what's surprising me is my own anger at the rigidity and the years of maintaining that, and the people that impose that I feel brought that. I'm just saying, and I accept your answer, thank you. But I feel like my own emotions around it are up, you know?
And again, part of working with rigidities, when I realize, again, we just spoke that rigidity is a form of resistance and denial. So when I see my rigidity, I get angry at that, that's in a way still a form of resistance and denial. I'm not allowing the whole thing I'm not allowing to acknowledge really what's going on. I'm getting angry. I'm not accepting. I don't want to see it. No? Because behind that, it may give me pain. It made me feel like, I don't know, I lost my time or something. Well, that's not the case. It's just what we had to go through. But try to get this point, right? Because, again, rigidity is a form of, I don't want to see that, whatever that may be. So if I get angry at my rigidity, when that starts to pop out, somehow to see a little bit of that, it's like still is a defense mechanism. Still I'm not like confronting reality. And what's behind that anger? Again, we have to become experts to engage into the meta question, right? The meta narrative, the question behind the question, the story within the story. So why I get angry at my rigidity? Why I'm denying my denial? Why not accepting? Why not sitting with my emotions? If it's anger, and behind anger, generally there is sadness. So I'm angry at me. I'm angry at Krishna. I'm angry at life. I'm angry at my guru. Probably I'm angry at my temple press. I don't know. At all of them put together. Okay, I'm not saying offensive. How can you feel that? I'm just saying we have to specify all that stuff. No, we have to make anger specific. No, not just I'm angry. That's still not the real thing. Why I'm angry? To whom? In relation to whom I'm angry? To what I'm angry? Start to disclose the emotions so we can really get to the actual root of that, because anger is not the root of anything. Rigidity is not the root of anything. As I always like to say, all these are symptoms. All these are like hints, like breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs. No? Rigidity, anger, sadness, whatever. What is that taking me to? What's behind that? And what's behind that? And what's behind? I'm being willing to explore, being willing to meet, and whatever needs to be met there, and meet ourselves there. That's so important, to let go of rigidity. To be the opposite of rigidity, of course, is flexibility. The example that Mahaprabhu gives is the one of the grass, right? It's flexible. It bends without breaking. Rigidity doesn't allow for bending, or if it allows for bending, it's in a way that is breaking me. Because if you are too rigid, you broke. So how can I bend? How can I adapt? How can I receive and integrate whatever is coming in a way that allows me not to get angry, not to resist, not to deny, but to confront, to put that in front of me and look at that and look at that in a way that is dignifying, where I don't need to hate myself, I don't need to blame other people, I don't need to play the victim, I don't need to create a conspiracy theory around the universe, I don't need to be resentful or bitter and see who I can crucify for this, but just accept reality for what it is. Again, acceptance is another way to counteract rigidity, because again, rigidity is resisting reality as it is. So, and many times that happens. Again, I'm trying hopefully to normalize this condition, not to idealize the condition as a goal to attain, but to normalize it as something that we are all going through in one way or another at some point. So, yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. Sometimes it feels risky to be angry at the people and things I'm angry at. That's my dilemma. Like, you know what I mean? And anger is a normal emotion. There's nothing wrong with anger.
Yeah.
So, but you know what I mean? We're conditioned to not be angry. So,
be angry. Be angry. I'm giving you permission, Rasangi. I'm empowering you. Empowering your anger at this moment. If you need to shout, yell at this moment, please unmute yourself and we will receive your Kali manifestation. Durga Devi with yeah, we need to express our emotions. And if I'm angry at someone, if it's, I mean, of course, depending in which way I express that, but there's places to be angry with people. And many times the people I'm most angry with are the people I love the most. And by my anger, actually, indirectly, I'm showing how much I love that person, how much I care. Because if I wouldn't care for you, I wouldn't be angry with you. You just disappear from my radar and that's it. So also try to see that, no? Try to see that anger as an indirect confirmation of your care for that person you're angry with, not as some guilt trip, like I cannot be angry to this person, that's offensive and this and that, but anger won't be ever the ultimate emotion. You follow my point? So I may be angry at someone and I need to allow my anger to be expressed. So at one point I stop being angry at that person. You follow my point? It's not that I'm expressing my anger so I perpetually remain angry with you. Nobody wants that. That's hell in itself. But because I care so much for not being angry with you, I'm expressing my anger with you. Because I care and because I love you and because this you say you did annoy me in this way, hurt me in this way, and behind my anger there is sadness. Please understand it, and so on and so forth. And by doing that, you are integrating your anger and it's becoming something healthy. Yeah. And it's keeping relationships real, right? We don't need to over idealize them and limit them to, okay, only these emotions are legal in this relationship. You cannot talk about this, you cannot talk about that. Anger is one of the 7 secondary rasas that Rupa Goswami mentioned. So that will be in eternity waiting for us. So we better get to learn how to be angry. Because there will be anger in eternity. So you have to know how to accommodate that one there. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next raise hands. We have 3 more. Let's see if we made it today. Karuneshwari, Ravinder.
Hi, Krishna Maharaj. Yeah, I think it's a little bit connected to Rasangi's question, although different. I sometimes come across quotes and I like to bring them to you to hear your thoughts on them, and not necessarily thinking that they're totally in line with what we follow, what you're following, but I like to bring them to you anyway. So I was listening to this John Shelby Spong. It's a mouthful to remember his name. And in one talk, and I can't even remember the context of the talk now, I just remember this quotation. He said that he feels that whatever particular faith tradition that we belong to, that the purpose of that is that we walk through it until we reach the point where we can break beyond its limits and then enter into the mystery of God. So immediately I really liked that, but I felt like I fully didn't understand it either, like what that would mean practically. And one of the first questions that came up for me was, oh, does that apply in Gaudiya Vaishnavism because we have such a complete philosophy? You know, there's so many details, every question, practically speaking, can be answered. So, because to me, when I hear that quotation from him, it sounds like at some point you give up belonging to any particular tradition. You don't need that anymore because you've evolved to a point where you're just entering into your relationship with God and you don't actually need to belong to a particular tradition. That was in the beginning stages, which, you know, links in a little bit to, I think, some of the things we've talked about tonight already.
Rigidity.
Yeah, rigidity and, you know, entering into a more nuanced stage of things. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that, please.
Okay, thank you. Of course, I don't know first of all, I don't know the author, so I don't know his background, so from which place he's saying what he's saying, what you quoted, and we didn't have the context of the quote, so that all makes it a little bit more difficult, but I will share some words. Again, I don't want to assume one thing or the other, but let's say that probably, and maybe I'm totally mistaken, I'm just making an hypothesis here. If the author's idea is more, what we will call impersonal at the end of the whole thing, I will interpret what he said like, okay, all traditions teach you something, but at the end, it only becomes Brahman. No,
He's a Christian.
He's a Christian.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that one. Again, still, of course, I will need more details about him. But I'm saying that I've heard some authors saying that, okay, you participate in one school or the other, but at the end of the story, all that disappears and you really are where you have to be, and all of us are in the same place. And again, these are words, but sometimes there is some theological conception attached to them. So if you have this conception, to give an example, everything is Brahman at the end, nothing exists but that irreducible reality called Brahman. Well, you can say things like that and really conceive. At the end of the day, all that we are perceiving and thinking in religious terms and in every other term, even our sense of individual identity disappears, and there's only one thing. That's maybe the radical, non-dualistic example. In a more nuanced way, how I interpret that, and again, it's my interpretation based on just the quote, is that, okay, we are each one of us now subscribed to a particular tradition and a school and sometimes institution and parampara and so on and so forth. And that's totally fine. But as we approach our goal, we will be able to see how people from other traditions, from other religions, beliefs, if you will, at the end of the day, they are worshiping the same person, right? The same supreme person. So there's a place to interpret the quote in that way, right? It's not that you have abandoned your ideal. I don't know, a Gaudiya Vaishnava would like to serve Krishna in Vrindavan, Mahaprabhu, Nityanavadip, whatever the case. That's a particular chamber in the spiritual world, and we will conceive some other practitioner from other faith traditions will project themselves to some other section of the spiritual world. Still, there is it's the same place, no? Even if you want to speak about different planets in the spiritual world, it's still the same spiritual world, right? It's not that we are there battling with one another. So in that sense, we will say, yeah, as much as you advance, you raise yourself beyond these institutional concerns and more social, religious identification, as I'm this and I'm that. And we all reach this place of, I'm a loving servant of God and I'm beloved by him. And every major mystic from any tradition has reached that place. Like I remember also, I quoted some time ago, I don't recall it now, the exact poem by Hafiz, that he will say something like, considering that, I cannot say it literally, but bearing in mind the things that I've learned from the Jewish and the Muslim and the Hindus and the Christian, how did he end the poem? Yeah, but something like I have difficulty in defining myself as member of this tradition or the other. Not because he was not, I mean, he was known to be a Muslim basically all his life. So it's not that he abandoned that, but he feels so much resonance with the substance of every other tradition that at one point of realization, you find the unity of that. That's my point. It doesn't mean that you are leaving your faith. It doesn't mean that at one point there's no more Christianity, no more Gaudiya Vaishnavism, no more whatever, Jewish mysticism, Sufism, and everyone just merge into the same thing. No. At the same time, they merge into the same thing in a more general way. We are all worshiping the same non-dual center, but there is diversity there. Again, we should always bring these two qualities into the picture: unity, diversity. Unity, diversity. We have to always humble and balance our statements. When we are talking too much about unity, maybe time to bring diversity into the picture. We are talking too much about diversity, we may need to bring unity. No? So that's how I'm reading it now. But again, I will need to know more about the author and his conception and the context of the quote. But that's how it spoke to me more substantially, that the real Paramahamsa or Saragrahi, in the terms of Bhaktivinoda Thakur have written many times lots about that, about a real Saragrahi or essence seeker, goes beyond the relative cultural details of every tradition, because every tradition has their own cultural relativity. But at the same time, there is the eternal substance of every tradition. We will refer to that as Sanatana Dharma, right? Sanatana Dharma, it doesn't mean one particular religion, it refers to the eternal function of the soul. And that becomes expressed and manifest in different ways and degrees in different traditions. But the Sanatana Dharma is the same thing. Or Sufis, I was the other day reading again this book by Hafiz. And actually Sufis and the Sufis themselves do not consider Sufism a particular tradition. They say Sufis are those mystic people who have a loving relationship with God, and that manifests in different ways, in different times, in different places. So they kind of universalize the notion of what it means to be a Sufi, very much alike with the idea of Sanatana Dharma. So I'm taking more from that vantage point, this quote you shared, that at one point of your practice, you go beyond all this institutional, relative, localized, sectarian, I would say designations, upadhis, that we will use, that are, again, it's necessary at some point. At some point, you need to identify yourself. I belong to this institution, and I'm a sannyasi, and I'm this, and I'm that. And you really hold on to those designations because you don't have a deeper designation yet. But when you go deeper to that, you can let go of that. Not that you stop being that, you just no longer hold on and then depend on them. Again, like Mahaprabhu's famous verse, where he's saying, I'm not Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, I'm not Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyasi. He's still a Brahman and he's still a sannyasi on one level, but he doesn't show any connection with that. No, I'm the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, the love of the gopis. I'm a lover of God. All the other designations that are crucial at some stage have been left behind. Not absolutely, again, he's still a sannyasi, he still functions as a Brahmin socially, but in his own deepest self-identification, that doesn't appear in the picture. So yeah, we are all invited to reach that Saragrahi point and identify with the actual substance of our tradition and every other wisdom tradition. Hope that helps. Karuneshwari, what do you think?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So we go to London with Jamuna.
Hi, Krishna. So anyway, I thought I'd ask you this.
Of course.
It's a possibly a devotee social thing. Anyway, since COVID, we saw that devotees fell out with each other over to vax, not to vax. You're a demon if you've had vaccines. You're not a demon. You're a demon if you haven't had vaccines. Either or, and it became very strong and crazy, and people were very, very opinionated about it.
Yeah.
Devotees fell out with each other. Family members fell out with each other. People left sanghas, and now a similar thing in regards to, now I'm not a political person and people might shoot me down for that. I have my opinions, but it's not something that really drives me. I'm not a very strongly opinionated political person. But I see that devotees are falling out over political views and, possibly even leaving sanghas and so on. So how to agree to disagree agreeably, how to put that into practice, how to actually see that the spiritual journey is beyond our political views, and to keep that as the primary focus and not getting so caught up with the rest of the shenanigans that we may see is our, something that we feel all of a sudden that we want to live or die for and shoot everyone else down.
Yeah.
And I just want to add, I just think it's very sad when I see devotees falling out over such things. So that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for your concern, for your, for honoring your sadness and sharing it with us. I think the answer to your question is in the question itself. You yourself mentioned that about bringing a bigger picture than the political picture into the arena. Because whether it's, as you say, you first started with the example of the vaccines, and then you presented the topic of politics. And my point is, well, maybe after that, something else will be the hot topic of the time, right? It's vaccine, then it's politics, then it's whatever. No? This World Cup, who will win, or who knows what. My point is, it's not so much about vaccines or politics, but it's about our capacity to, I wouldn't say agree to disagree, because sometimes that's not enough. We need to love each other despite disagreements. That's how we can work on that, because agree to disagree sometimes ends up being like a more diplomatic way to, I mean, I'm not against that on a certain level, but if we are talking about sanghas and groups that are sharing a common goal and way of living life, and they have some bond that we assume there is some intimate bond on some level, we need to honor that bond by putting all the differences in their place, so to say, not canceling them, but not allowing those differences to devour the sweetness of our bond, so to say. And for me, that's the moment of truth, when you see where each one is standing in this journey. Because if I really care for my relationship with you as something sacred or valuable, even if some difference of opinion comes, I won't allow that to get in the way of my connection with you at all. And that doesn't mean I will force myself to change my opinion so we don't have any difference, because that's not healthy either. I stop being myself, thinking for myself, feeling for, and I wouldn't either try to convince you to think as myself, so I keep loving you. And we generally tend to do these two things, right? whether I repress my own opinions and thinkings and feelings to conform to the group, so I am still accepted, I still belong, I'm still part of the tribe, I'm not like a black sheep, I'm not looked upon like a weird, controversial person, whatever. We conform and we lose ourselves in that. Or we become a dictator, basically, where we expect and impose our own ideas onto everyone, and we don't have, again, rigidity. We are not willing to accommodate difference, and we are not willing to take the time that it takes to do that, because that's a tapasya. No? If I have I'm not either a political person, so that may be frustrating for some of those who are more politically oriented. To be honest, it's not in my blood. And at the end of the day, there's always something good happening and there's always something wrong happening at the same time. That's the mixed bag we have when there is no Yudhishthira Maharaj ruling the planet, right? Even with Yudhishthira Maharaj, there was some mess going on. If you study the Mahabharata, it's not that everything went like Jai. So what to speak if we don't have the Pandavas on the throne? So for me, the question is not about politics or vaccines, but it's about how willing we are to take the time that it takes to really know each other, and to really know each other for who we are, and to forgive each other, and to wait each other, and to be forgiven by one another, to really touch that deeper layer of connection. Because if not, it's all still on the surface: ego, fear, overreaction, personal attacks, unwillingness to hear, unwillingness to listen. I'm saying this, to be honest, I'm just trying to clarify. I'm not saying all this while thinking in my mind about one particular person present in this group, or subscribing to one political view or the other. Because for me, still all that keeps the illusion of duality in place, right? You are on this side or you are on this side. No? Like sometimes one is talking, I've heard sometimes they was talking in political terms, Maharaj, on which side you are? And I'm like, why you are forcing me to be on one side? No? Why? I mean, by creating sides, you are creating the problem. No? Why don't make our best effort to try to overcome that duality in our own mind to begin with? So, again, I'm not condemning anyone, criticizing anyone. I'm just pointing at what I think is the actual thing behind the topic, right? I mean, I don't know. I can think about my most intimate relationships in this life with people that I've lived with for decades, and we have been with each other in our best and worst moments. And I can remember how many times we have differences of opinion. No? It's not that it didn't happen. And we had difference of opinion, and we fought with one another because of that. But we never, how to say, we never insulted one another. We never reached a point of losing respect for one another. Right? For my point, we never lost sight of the importance of the connection with that person. So even if on some level we were fighting, we were having difference of opinion, we will have some, one wants to one room, one goes to the other. In the depths, we both knew this will be over in later today, tomorrow. I mean, this is not the end of the story. I mean, I'm not willing to allow this to be the end of the story. I'm willing to fight for this person that I love. So that's my chance to demonstrate my affection. Not to break the relationship, no, not quitting on the person, as Bhakti is putting, but because as we don't want to be left by the others, I have to be willing to do the same. So yeah, it never and I don't want to put myself as an example. I'm just reflecting on how I take this situation because you asked me about it. And of course, sometimes, unfortunately, in some relationships, some of the parts is not willing to do that job, because it's also two people are involved in these things. Of course, sometimes more, but I'm speaking about relationship. So if one of the two parts is not willing to do their part, you cannot do their part. You have to be willing to do your part as much as you can. The other person, if they are not willing, well, sorry for them. And of course, it will be sad for me to lose that connection for the time being, but I cannot also force myself to do both parts myself. That wouldn't be healthy. So it's a mutual responsibility. It's a mutual project, how we take care of each other. So, and again, that has to be reflected in how we see each other before, during, after the difference of opinion. And for me, this nonsense of labeling each other as demons, and that has to disappear absolutely from our lingo. Even I think we have to, as a friend of mine will say, we have to commit dicticide, no? Like a homicide in the dictionary. Dicticide. You have to kill the word demon because of all the generational baggage that is attached to that. And what to speak of throwing that like cheaply just because people think differently than me. That's childish, but also that's very unbecoming of the type of relationship we want to have. So, and if someone is a demon, with all honesty, to begin with, it's ourselves. No? If you want to label people as demons, start at home and acknowledge all the demonic stuff. No? Satan means, originally the word Satan means the accuser, right? So it's funny because I'm calling other demons. You're a demon, but I'm being the accuser, right? And the devil comes from the Latin diabolus. Diabolus means to divide. So again, duality, finger pointing, all that nonsense, no? All that kindergarten nonsense that hopefully, as a mature Gaudiya Vaishnava community, we can learn from that and grow beyond, and not be shouting at each other like kids. And now he did say that, he did that to me, he thinks like that, he's a demon. Man, come on. We have more serious stuff to do here. The fighting about my political opinions and whether to take the vaccine or not. Of course, we can talk about those things. I'm not saying that's forbidden, but that has to happen in a perimeter of deep respect for each other first. If we haven't learned to have this respect for each other, probably we should put all the other discussions to rest and just speak about how we can have deep respect for each other. That's for me the important point here. If I don't know how to be gentle enough, kind enough, compassionate enough, empathic enough, respectful enough on a basic human level, what to speak of Vaishnava etiquette toward a Vaishnava, if I'm not there yet, probably I shouldn't speak about anything else, because any other topic will bring to my awareness my lack of qualification in terms of a basic human interaction. And if that happens, okay, but in that case, I should stop the conversation on whatever topic I'm having, and okay, let's work on how we can have a civilized human interaction without the need of labeling, branding, stigmatizing, crucifying one another. Where's that need coming from? That's a real question. Where's that need coming from? Why do I need to throw you into a pit of snakes, no? Or label you as this or that, or see you as, where's that need coming from? And it's something that I have to solve with myself. It's coming from my own, whatever, brokenness, fear, rigidity, you name it. And we have to take responsibility for that. Weak faith requires an enemy, Srila Siddhartha Maharaj will say, right? Weak faith requires an enemy. Weak faith sees enemies, sees opposition, feels threatened, counterattacks, demonizes, because we are still not strong enough to hold space for others, to hold space for difference, to accommodate, to harmonize. And I'm not saying this condemning anyone. I'm just saying some of us are there and fail at that, and it's okay. but we should normalize this conversation so it doesn't become more than that. No, and we don't conclude taking things personally, and that person say that to me and he's against me. Taking things personally, it's still realm of the false self. Because from soul to soul, from Atma to Atma, there's no Atma against any Atma in actual reality. In actual principle reality, how reality really operates, nobody's against anyone. So when we enter into that us and them, that already is confirming that we are somewhere else. And that we cannot ascertain things from that perspective. And that whatever conclusion we will take from that perspective will always be partial, incomplete, biased, and it won't take to a fruitful outcome. So many times we need to, going back to our first question, enter into silence and pray and listen deeply. And whatever we say when we dare to open this little big mouth we may have, it comes from a place of introspection, and respect, and our words are informed by discernment. We should take care of which words we use. Each word sound that powerful, create reality. So whatever sound you invoke, that creates a particular reality for you and for the other person. You are creating worlds every time you open your mouth. Let's put it that way. So that's delicate. Which world are you creating? Heavenly planet, hellish planet? What are you creating when you open your mouth? So yeah, let's do that in a way that is generous and kind to one another. Anyhow, there are lots to say. I'm seeing that Char, you're raising your hand. Maybe I don't know if you're connected to this topic or not. Maybe and we address whatever you have to share today, and we will put the discussion to rest for a few minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going back and forth about if I wanted to say something, because there was just like a lot of resistance coming up as you were talking for me. Because I think it can be easy. I think if we lived in a perfect society or a perfect Gaudiya Sangha, we could put certain differences aside, but sometimes it goes beyond a difference of opinion, and the opinions that another person might have may encroach upon, as you were saying, like this full self, which is our swabhav, or our identity in this particular body, that encroaches on my ability to exist, or the ability of each and every one of us to exist, right? Certain opinions that people might have. And so I think that I have been around so many devotees who avoid political issues through a false sense of transcendence, and that is what makes me angry, and that I identify as my rigidity. And because for me, I would love to be able to do that and not be angry about what is happening in the world, but for me, this is, again, acknowledging my rigidity, this is black and white for me. And I would love to be able to exist in a gray space on this, but certain opinions are like, they prevent certain people from living, like even certain leaders within, like I was literally talking in a group earlier about one leader in ISKCON, and how his opinions encroach on the right for women to just exist, for gay people to exist. And I don't think that that's fair, and I don't think it should be avoided. And I also think that if people have those opinions on the swabhavs, which is important, of devotees, and it disrespects devotees' rights to live, human beings to live, jivas to live, I don't think we have to respect that. And so a lot of resistance was coming up as you were speaking on respecting opinions, because if you don't if you don't respect my right to exist or another jiva's right to exist, I don't want to have a healthy, productive Gaudiya relationship with you. And it's something I'm closed off to. I don't think it would be possible for me. So that is what was coming up, and I'm grateful that Bhakti Rasa said, like, she's privately messaged me and said, like, did you change your mind? And I was thinking, I don't know. But I feel like it's important for me to express this, because there are certain political issues which are not political. And I didn't ask for this body to be political, you know, but it is. It has been politicized. And unfortunately, I have to exist like that. And so the least we can ask is for devotees, transcendental, loving people, to respect this specific swabhav, which I don't remember choosing. I did technically choose it, but I'm not choosing to exist in it in this lifetime, even though it is my karma. Yeah. Thank you for hearing me.
No, please. Thank you. Thank you for the courage to share and the willingness to step into outside of your comfort zone, for sure, and disclose your heart and your feelings and your emotions. And I'm sure we all value your honesty.
Yeah. And I of course, I also agree with you, Muna, that and you, that devotee, it's completely unacceptable to call each other demons over something like a vaccine opinion.
Yeah.
That's a personal health decision. But then there are certain things where, you know, opinions will mean you shouldn't exist, and that's just like not okay to me. Yeah, thank you.
And I will say that, of course, in principle, no devotee agrees that, okay, it's fine for people not to be allowed to exist. I don't think we will agree with that. Now, I can understand by what you're mentioning, Char, how in some particular situations, political situations or whatever, one could experience some of those decisions or dynamics as encroaching people's existence. And from that place, feeling, okay, you are supporting that, you are supporting people's non-existence, so to say. I'm being too summarizing here. And from that place, I don't want anything to do with you. But maybe the other person doesn't understand what you are seeing and is agreeing with something and seeing something that the other person is not seeing. Again, I'm talking in general, I'm pointing to any situation. But for me, at the end of the day, the solution to all that is at least we should be able to see it and to talk. And to say, and for me, if I feel that your political stance is opposing diametrically what Gaudiya Vaishnavism is because of this A, B, C, and D, I should be able to disclose my heart and thinking in an open, respectful way, and the other person hopefully is willing to hear. And if they have their own thought and thinking, they should be able to present that, bring that to the table. And again, hopefully the spirit of the exchange is one of Bada, which is both are looking for the truth. They are not trying to defeat one another in debate or anything, trying to outsmart the other person. And even if at the end of the conversation, we still agree that we have the difference of opinion and really we need to take a distance because of my particular situation, and I cannot feel that it will be ethical for me to relate with you, okay, that may be another conversation, but I don't think we should rush into such a conclusion without first having tried our best to make ourselves understandable to the other person and trying to understand the other person. Both things take time. It's not so easy to make yourself understandable to other people because sometimes it's very, how to say, lazy or something else. Maybe like I say something and I expect everyone to get what I'm from where I'm saying that, what I'm feeling, what I'm seeing, and that's not the case. One lives in their own universe. There's one microphone on, back to us. And the opposite, right? I need to take, that may take even more time for me to understand from which place the other person is saying what it's saying. But for me, that's the price to pay for, even if we end up disagreeing after that, it will be a dignifying disagreement, in the sense that we are not parting ways in a immature way, blaspheming one another, resentful, bitter, but having made our best attempt to connect with one another. And that attempt in itself, well, is fruitful. Even if I differ with you, even if I need to take a distance from you, and it happened to me with some people also in my life, not necessarily on political issues, but on some other issues, that I really realized, okay, we have this difference of opinion of this, that is not a detail. And it's a big difference, so I need to take some distance. But in that distance, I'm not hating you, I'm not blaspheming you, I appreciate you, but it's a healthy distance. So I think we all need to train ourselves to first go through those few fires of hearing and listening to one another and making ourselves clear, and even being willing to change our minds if that is to happen from both sides. That willingness has to be there, because if I engage in conversation but in advance I'm absolutely unwilling to change my perspective, that's not healthy also. It's like an over absolutizing of my own perception of reality, and there's always space for a new perspective, a new angle. So that willingness has to be there also. So I will try, I want to just to clarify. I mean, I agree with basically everything you're saying, Char. I'm not arguing against your words. I'm just adding a few thoughts to how I think, despite this particular topic, how we can learn to engage with it, and always keeping a door open for a new light to shine and a new perspective. Because at the end of the day, let's be honest, still we are conditioned beings and we are not seeing it all. So there should be that, as I like to say, epistemological modesty or epistemic humility. How do I know what I know? I should be humble enough that I don't have it fully in place yet. So I have to still be willing to be surprised, transformed, listen. And even if I retain my opinion after a conversation, that has to be in a very gentle and compassionate way. So I think, and if we are honest and sincere, maybe we realize, yeah, I'm not doing all the work I could do to hone that skill. So if I realize that that's the case, then I should be put my hands to work on that. No? And even if I retain my opinions, but at least in a certain way, right? Let's learn to disagree in a noble and dignifying way. No, I'm not here pretending that we will agree on everything. That's illusion. That would be so boring. That would be desperate. No? We are agreeing on everything. My gosh, I want to run away from that place. But how to, again, allow differences to become ornaments, especially if we share such a common center as Gaudiya Vaishnavism, such an all beautiful, harmonizing, accommodating center, absolute center. So all these other topics that maybe some of them seen as a relative reality in connection to the ultimate truth, how we can understand that, accommodate, learn from one another, and grow together. Yeah. Anyhow, it's a long topic, and I appreciate that you brought it to the table. And of course, I want to make it clear that this topic or any topic are always welcome, whether in this particular satsang or in any hopefully circle of conversation and sangha. But again, how we can do that in a way that is respectful and dignified. And again, we may fail miserably in our attempts to do that. It's not that we will try to engage in conversation and we are the most mature human beings on earth, but still, at least we have to trust the honesty and the integrity of our intention in getting together. And even if we fail miserably in explaining ourselves and listening to one another, to keep that underlying trust that, okay, we are coming from a good heart, hopefully. Let's keep trying. Let's keep talking. Let's keep honing and refining our communication skills and our love for one another. It's a lifetime project, so no rush, guys. That may take some time, but at least personally, I'm glad that we can continue to try that in a safe circle. No, it's not about doing it perfectly from one shot, but continue to being able to try it in a circle that allows and gives permission for this type of conversation. So thank you for allowing me for being part of that. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Rinam Prabhu ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.